Right, welcome to the Stellify Podcast. Before we begin today's conversation, I just want to take a moment to remember a friend of mine who sadly passed away last week. Um, like many people over the past few years, um, David trusted the medical advice that was given at the time. After receiving two Pfizer injections, he later developed stage 4 cancer and tragically passed away not long afterwards. Um, Obviously, I want to be a little bit careful because I'm not making claims about cause and effect. But what I do think is important is that we create spaces where difficult conversations about health, medicine, and transparency can happen without fear. And today's podcast with my guest Cheryl Grainger is very much in that spirit. But before we begin that conversation, I'd like to just play a short video that David recorded only a few months ago, and then I will introduce my guest.
I'm Dave. For those of you in the group that don't know me, I've got stage 4 colon cancer, which all began after I had the Pfizer jabs. I'm not inferring anything, but what I'm finding incredible this morning, after everything that's happened and has been happening to people up and down the country, that they're still peddling on BBC Radio the COVID jabs and the flu jabs, and I'm not sure whether they're safe or not, because of what happened to me. Because before, I'm not inferring anything at all, but before I had the COVID jab, I was perfectly healthy, and that actually in 2016. I'd recovered from a pulmonary embolism in my lungs. I'd had blood clots in my lungs, which to all intents should have killed me. Now, there are indications in the Pfizer documentation that there is a risk of blood clotting with that vaccine. And it wasn't too long after I'd had my second one, I got a blood clot in my leg. Yeah. And that was the January following the vaccination I had in May. So I was diagnosed with a blood clot in the leg the following January. And then I was having bowel problems as well, which at the time I had no I didn't even imagine at the time that it would be cancer. So just as I said, guys, it's like I said, everything's personal choice. And I always recommend doing your own research. But I find it incredible that they're trying to say this thing's essential for your health when they've got no proof of that, and the statistics don't bear that out. Okay, guys, just food for thought, and I hope you find this useful. And guys, feel free to share this around if you find it useful. Bye for now.
So, obviously, it's quite a sobering conversation, and David sadly not with us, but he was a battler. He fought hard, and I'm sure he's wherever he is right now, he's going to be making a lot of noise. So as I'd like to bring on my guest now, Cheryl Grainger is a pharmaceutical industry training consultant who has spent years teaching subjects such as pharmacology, immunology, clinical trials, anatomy, physiology, and the development of medicines within the healthcare system. She's also trained people in the ABPI Code of Practice, which governs how pharmaceutical companies operate and interact with the NHS. But during the events that began in 2020, Cheryl began to notice something that deeply concerned her. Many of the scientific standards and regulatory principles she had spent years teaching others inside the industry suddenly appeared to be ignored or suspended, and that realization led her down a path of investigation that included challenging the MHRA directly, submitting freedom of information requests, and even taking a 2-year legal battle to a first-tier tribunal in order to obtain pregnancy data relating to the vaccine rollout. What she says she discovered through that process raises serious questions about transparency, regulatory oversight, and the way safety data is interpreted and communicated to the public. So today, I'd like to explore Cheryl's journey, what she's uncovered, and what it means for the future of medicine and public trust. So, Cheryl, welcome to the Stellify Podcast. I really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you.
Well, lovely to see you, Ant. I'm so sorry to hear about your friend David, and thanks for showing that video. I'm sure that he would be grateful that you've done that.
Yeah, David really wanted to fight this. He really wanted to make a noise because he was very angry, as you can imagine. He was very calm in that video, bless him. And but anyone who knows David will know he got very, very angry during these past couple of years, and understandably so too. We sadly lost my missus's dad passed away also after 2 injections. We're going back a couple of years now, and he also got very angry because he also knew that it was the injections that had caused it. So interesting time, Cheryl. Not the most pleasant of times, unfortunately, most of the time, especially for us that kind of could see what was going on. Before we get into the serious side of these topics, because these are serious and these conversations have to be had, could you just tell my audience a little bit about your background and how you came to work within the pharmaceutical industry, please?
Yeah, I mean, I did a very general degree that was supposed to get us to see all different parts of industry. And then once we were in industry, we weren't just working in one little slot. We could see what was happening in the whole of it. And I did it all the wrong way around. I went into marketing, then I went into sales. So I was a drug pusher for a while. And then I became a training manager and eventually left to set up my own business as a training consultant. I was very fortunate it fitted in a treat with having the children. Because I work from home. Anyway, that apart, one of the courses that I always did, and I always mentioned this, was problem solving and decision making. So that was something that I taught to a lot of people. One of the biggest challenges is when I got 15 PhD people in front of me to do this, and you had to go from between. It shows how long ago it is, and it was 4 flip charts we used to develop the arguments about it. Anyway, I've never been asked so many questions, but I got through it. And the thing is, most people, especially in industry, when they've got a problem, they keep solving it in the same way. And the reason being, they've never defined the problem properly. So actually, if you look at the situation analysis and what's actually led to that problem and actually get it down to the nitty gritty of what's gone wrong, you've more chance of solving it. And that's kind of, I suppose, maybe quite critical of a lot of things because, you know, especially with medications, they don't actually get the problem right in the first place as to what's causing it before they come up with this treatment. For example, cholesterol and statins. Millions, billions of people around the world are on statins, and the problem they've got is not a problem with cholesterol. So, you know, it's defining the problem that's very important. So that's another thing that's in good thread, really. But yeah, I train medical reps. The syllabus I stick to is what we should be doing, and you know, the rules and regulations around the code of practice. For example, the word that you're not allowed to use, the pharma industry is not allowed to use about any ethical medicine, is the word safe. There'll always be Mrs. Bloggs up the road who has an idiosyncratic reaction. It'll be different to everybody else. but there's nothing that you can say is safe. So good old aspirin, 10% of people who take aspirin have a chance of getting a gut bleed.
Wow.
So, that's why they started enteric coating it. They put it in a wrapper so that it got through the gut, it got through the stomach.
Right.
So, most people don't know that, because obviously they don't tell you, because that would affect sales. So, and paracetamol, which is what I used to sell a lot of, because I did Panadol and Panadol soluble and the whole gamut of them, that can kill you after 12 or 14 tablets. So if you're going to commit suicide on paracetamol, you need to know what you're doing, because you can take very few. You can still knock yourself out. You can come around and think, oh, I'm fine. And within a week, you probably won't be here.
Wow.
So there's a lot of things that people don't know about, the common things that they use. That's why you can't go into the supermarket and buy several packets of these things. They restrict on how many you take, supposedly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I knew a lot about the way that a drug should be developed because of clinical trials. And the thing that's changed, Hedley Reese will tell you this, is that in my day, when I was part of a company, everything was done by that company. So you had your head office that was the sales and marketing team, and you had the manufacturing lot nearby, and you had the clinical trial people were your people, etc., etc. So it was all done in-house, and then it started being divided up. So it was all over the place, and there's less control with that, and you need more rules and regulations around it, but who's implementing those? And that led me to the MHRA, because they don't just look at clinical trials. They're supposed to inspect manufacturing units. They're supposed to decide if you can do your clinical trial, whether it's ethical and what have you to do that clinical trial. So all these things are controlled by our regulator, and it's not up to scratch, which is what I've been fighting for a while now. So that basically is how I got into this.
What regarding pharmaceutical training, the consultancy, what is that? What do you actually do there then? What's that role?
I mean, as a trainer, I used to train in all sorts of skills more than drugs, really, because the drug training in a lot of pharma companies is done by the marketing people. But I used to train in the skills, so selling skills and presentation skills and all the skills you need.
Yeah.
Plus things like my problem solving, the ones that were more interesting to do. And then when I left, the thing that I'd got quite a few people doing was this ABPI exam. So that's the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industry. Anybody who is a medical representative selling to doctors, both GPs and hospitals, have to pass this exam to show they're competent enough to sit in front of a medic and sell their medications. Okay. That's the idea behind it. It has a syllabus, learning material that it's based on, and I get them through that.
Right.
So that's why I've not got an in-depth, specialism. It's a very broad thing, but that's been very good in understanding what's been happening recently.
No, I can imagine you've been able to sit back and see quite a lot happening, really, with your background.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about efficacy, I mean, that's kind of mentioned in the Code of Practice as well.
Right.
So you can't use the relative risk ratio on its own. You've got to use the absolute risk ratio. And the relative risk ratio for Pfizer and the vaccines was about 95%. And its absolute was 0.84% in terms of efficacy. So, and it says it basically is telling fibs if you're actually using one instead of the other. And the code does that. So the first time I got in touch with MHRA was to ask them about those two aspects of the code, because people weren't abiding by it. And that bothered me. And yet nothing happened. And, we plodded on. It wasn't necessarily the pharma industry that was saying it, but it was certainly the media. And Parliament and, anybody who didn't know was telling you it was safe and effective.
Well, that's, you're saying about safe, the slogan safe and effective, and efficacy was, they were telling you it was, I think I remember when it was all being thrown out there and they were saying, once you've had this, you are covered, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But then if you didn't get it, you were a danger to those that had it.
Yeah. So what also was called safe and effective was thalidomide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been going on a long time, this. And thalidomide is something that we should just probably mention, because the MHRA was set up in 2003 in this kind of format. But it had evolved from other committees in the past. And what happened was with thalidomide, obviously that was a real tragic event caused by the drug. It's funnily enough, they took about 5 years to make the connection. Okay. We've been more than 5 years now with the vaccines.
Yeah, we have.
So it took them about, and that was before computers, obviously, with thalidomide. That was medics talking to each other, because they kept having these babies that were either died very tragically or they were very tragically deformed.
Yes.
So thalidomide brought in the 1968 Medicines Act. And that one of the stipulations in that was that you had to have safety data. You had to ensure safety data for pregnancy before it was given to the pregnant. Makes sense. Yeah. And of course, this is the first time with these vaccines that a novel treatment, if you want to call them vaccines, a novel genetic therapy has actually been rolled out to the pregnant at the same time as everybody else.
But not just rolled out, they were pretty much advertised. This is good for you. This is the right thing to do. Yeah. Pressured as well, I would imagine. Nurses have been there pressuring.
Well, yeah, I mean, not so long ago, I went with a friend to a gynae clinic just to hold a hand, and we were sat outside. She went in, and I was sat in the waiting room. And it was with the pregnant women as well. So there was lots of people with lumps and bumps, and a great big wall-size poster, full length of the wall, telling you as a pregnant person to actually, I shouldn't say that, pregnant woman, to get the vaccine. And the door at the side of that was the one you went through to get the vaccine. And I had to kind of, I had to calm myself down, because I wanted to stand up and just tell them. It was so lunacy. It was lunacy that they were advocating this when they didn't know anything about it. I mean, they were still telling us that it went in your arm and stayed in your arm.
I know.
So do you want me to move on to my tribunal and how I got into that?
Well, if we can just paint a bit more of a picture first, and then we can get into it, because just for my listeners that don't know who you are, I just want to say, for example, back in 2020, I think you saw something that would be illogical and unscientific, I would imagine, that would have...
It was the telly. It was those three stooges at three lecterns stood there every night telling you how many people had died.
Yeah.
And I read at one point that in India, they actually tell you how many people have survived, which is a lot cheerier way of going on. But, there was 3 statements on that lectern as well. And that's how I knew that, parliamentarians got the message across. They repeat things 3 times.
Yeah.
And you just thought, this is ridiculous. So they were saying how many had died of COVID each day, which I kind of had a question mark over, because at that point, it was within 60 days of a test, I think. Somebody got it reduced down to 28 days, but, it was just very high effect. But there was more people dying of dementia and cardiovascular disease each day. They never got mentioned. We didn't have a programme on the telly telling us how many of those had died each day.
No, of course not.
That's why I started. I mean, my daughter and my son were a bit, mother's gone mad. But my daughter, it dawned on her that they weren't coming along the road with the cart to take the bodies away, because that's the sort of impression they were given. This is the Black Death.
Well, that's right, yeah.
So the whole thing, I kept saying to everybody, it's totally illogical and unscientific, this. And I eventually saw Nick Hudson interviewed and give his assessment of how it all developed. The fact of us knowing a few people had died of a peculiar thing in China, right the way around to us having a test and basically screening people and what have you. It took a month. It took a month to develop all this, things that develop, for years. And you've got Kerry Morris, the guy that won the Nobel Prize for inventing the PCR test, who told you it can't diagnose an infection.
Yeah,
but that's what we were using.
And conveniently passed away just before the whole thing started.
Very strangely, yes.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it just, everything I came across didn't make sense. And then I heard different people talking about alternative treatments instead of just putting people into hospital and putting them on ventilators and basically saying you can't do anything for them. And one of the things that was mentioned was hydroxychloroquine.
Mm-hmm.
I used to sell hydroxychloroquine. So there's another link in my head. And of course, they then pulled that to pieces and said it killed people with heart attacks and what have you, heart problems.
That's right, I remember that.
Well, that didn't happen. So we used to give it in higher doses. It was called a DMARD, a disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drug. So you start off with your rheumatic patient with the non-steroidals, from aspirin upwards, and then Brufen, Nurofen, and all the rest of it. And then when that's not working, you went on to the disease-modifying, they were called. And it was gold and penicillamine and the whole, about 6 of them. And every single one of them was a little bit more dramatic. So you had to test for certain things.
Yeah.
When I sold hydroxychloroquine, you had to go and see the ophthalmologist because it could cause problems with your retina. So you go into the hospital, you try and sell the hydroxychloroquine to the rheumatologist, and you try and get the ophthalmologist to promise they'd do a 6-monthly test just to make sure their eyesight was okay. And so I thought, what are they talking about hearts for? It's not hearts, it's eyes. So again, that didn't make sense to me. And it just so happened that I'd sold the thing. So it's all these little things were building a picture up in me to suggest this is all a con. This is not right. And then, of course, you found out about the basically the Liverpool pathway that was being used in care homes, and the midazolam and morphine, which are both respiratory suppressants. And you give that for a respiratory condition where they're having trouble breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't make sense. And of course, then you realise that was the Liverpool kind of pathway they were on, the Liverpool. And I actually lost my father after a hip replacement in 2013. And it was about that time they were stopping doing the Liverpool care pathway. Shouldn't have care in the title. And he was on that, and I didn't realise. I was not awake enough to know. And they basically wouldn't give him anything to eat or drink. And he's a big, tough guy, and it took him 6 days to die. And my mum sat there with us for 6 days holding his hand. And, you give a little bit of liquid on a sponge on a stick, and he'd suck on that like it was, life itself, which it was, because there was nothing going into him. So I've seen it in the process of it being used, and it's not right. And of course, a lot of people die with a bacterial pneumonia. So even if you've had a viral infection, you develop a bacterial lung infection, and they give you an antibiotic, and some people will still die, and some people will come through because of that antibiotic. They stop using antibiotics.
It's quite frightening, really, what's going on. And I've had obviously conversations with Debbie Evans in the past, but I've had Jackie Devoy on as well, and talking about the NHS and obviously the midazolam and morphine.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying.
But we've got the evidence. We've got Matt Hancock.
Yeah, he just gets away with it while he goes on telly. Well,
he's in conversation with, can't remember the name of the guy now, the MP, Dr. Luke Evans. So he's a medic. Have you got enough syringe drivers? Have you got enough of this? Oh, yes, we've got plenty. And that's because they bought half of France's stock of midazolam.
That's right.
Which is what they use when they're exterminating a person in the States.
And that's it. They just get away with it all the time.
Yeah. And it's very nasty stuff. I had a friend whose mother-in-law had a twisted bowel, and she was 90, and they wouldn't operate because they said she'd down the table. Well, they were willing to risk that rather than her being the agony she was in. But no, they insisted, and they started then giving her midazolam. And I had phone calls from the hospital with her mum-in-law in the background making terrible noises, trying to give them some advice into how to get the doctors to take her off this stuff. I mean, it's awful, horrible.
It's horrible.
So I kept getting involved in lots of these little things that in May 2020, so right at the start, my mum-in-law, who was 101, was in a care home.
Right.
We were responsible for her. Poppy, her name was. And I got a phone call from the home to say that she was probably on her way out. She was near end of life. And I said, right, we're coming in. Oh, no, you can't do that. We're locked down and what have you. I said, yes, I'm coming in. My 2 kids are older. I said, I'll come in with the 2 kids. We'll put gloves on. Never wore gloves. But we'll put gloves on. We'll put a mask on. We'll come in. We'll come in the back door. We'll go straight to a room. We'll spend an hour there. And then we'll leave without seeing anybody. Ooh. Anyway, I did. I was lucky that it was at the beginning of lockdowns because, then it got more sticking to the rules and more entrenched, and they didn't really know what they were doing right at the beginning. And we did. We spent an hour. Ellie was dancing around her bed, and we were talking to her, and hopefully she could hear what we were saying, and hopefully she enjoyed us being there. And it took about a week, and then we got another phone call to say this is probably it. I said, right, I'm coming in again. No. And I said, yes. I said, there's no more danger of me bringing any books in and my kids bringing books in than the people who work there. I'm coming in. So I did.
Yeah.
And I just thought, if you've been on this planet for 101 years, it seems wrong that your people aren't around you when you go.
Too right, it's wrong.
But everybody needed to do that. They all needed to be as stroppy as me.
I know, because you saw this plenty of footages of horrendous, heinous. The whole thing is so dark, it's unbelievable. I remember seeing a photograph of a gentleman holding a glove with warm water in it, so it looked like he was holding someone's hand.
Yeah.
Things like that. I mean, we should never forget any of this.
No. A cousin had to go in. Her husband was dying, and she had to go in, and she had to completely gown up, and he couldn't see her. Last moments with her husband alive, and he couldn't really see her because she's all gloved up and all the rest of it. It's not right.
Disgusting.
It's not right at all. But we needed to react against it because, but they made people so frightened.
They did. Well, the brainwashing was quite extraordinary, really.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned, people thought you were a bit crazy, some of your family members or whatever. Anyone who stood up against it got questioned by friends and family.
Yeah.
Most of us that I know lost friends.
Yeah. Well, most people do. That's why they know kind of what I'm saying is true, that it either killed or injured a lot of people. They know people. There's surveys in the States that have found out that high percentages now, it's in the 50-odd%, know somebody greatly affected by this. So people are aware, which is good, but it's taken a long time. I went to all the protests.
Yeah, good for you.
In my long life, being a student and everything, I never protested anything in my life.
Yeah.
So that's how strong I felt about this. And I woke up the morning of the first one I knew about, and I thought, it was August, I think, 2020, and I thought to myself, if you don't go, you'll be really annoyed with yourself. You're lying in bed and you're talking to yourself. So I got up, got dressed, knocked on the kids' doors and told them. And Dan said, well, what are you doing that for? And then I went to Elliot and he said, well, I'll come and get you when you're locked up in the police station. Well, at least she was more helpful. So, and then I go into London, and obviously I'm not from London, don't particularly like going into London, but we're on the tube without a mask on because obviously that's what I was protesting against.
Mm.
And it was, you looked along the carriages because you can see right the way through, and it was like zombie town because they were all masked up, faceless wonders looking at me.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking to myself, wonder if I'll be the only one there when I get there. And of course, there were loads of people. It didn't matter if you were a dustbinman or you were a PhD student or a medic or whatever. Whoever was on that march knew everything that was going on because they'd had the time with lockdowns to look into it.
Yeah, it kind of went against them a little bit, that, I think.
It did. It gave them too much time to investigate.
And that's why they want to control the internet, because it's easy for us to communicate. It's easy for us to send each. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown around that's probably a lot of rubbish as well. But it does give you the opportunity to dig deep if you are not as busy.
Yeah.
The lockdown went against them in that respect.
Yeah.
But it went against us as well because it damaged.
Yeah.
A lot. It was so much damage involved in those lockdowns. I don't think I was reading this morning about. we're going a little bit off tangent because I'll pull it back in a second. But what's happening now in Iran is a cause for alarm regarding the oil crisis, which plays into the hands of the net zero and the Agenda 2030 and the 15-minute cities and everything else. That would suggest, I think it's Thailand. No, sorry, let me get that right. It's over that way anyway. They are encouraging their people to work from home again.
Right.
So it's Vietnam. Sorry, Vietnam have announced that. So straight away you're going, they're going to try this again, aren't they? But I don't think they'll get away with it as much this time. Apart from the people will be priced out from spending on fuel because fuel prices are going up already. I think people will be a bit more, I'm not doing that.
Well, I think, as I say, if you look at the number of people who didn't get vaccinated, there's a lot of people who are awake. I shouldn't really say this, but I quite enjoyed lockdown. I mean, obviously, I work from home anyway, so I'm used to doing that. That's normal for me. Yeah. But it was lovely weather.
It was beautiful weather in March 2020.
So my garden never looked so good, and I was brown as a berry, and I was out there happy as Larry. Probably vitamin D would have been off the scale, and I was happy. Yeah. My kids were living with me, so I wasn't on my own. They had jobs that they could get to. They weren't at home all the time.
Yeah.
So it worked out okay for me, but I know I was in the minority. And the other thing that I should mention that happened at that point, do you remember Harold Shipman and bumping older people off and taking the money and what have you?
Yeah.
At that point, you had to have two signatures on the death certificate.
That's right.
2 medics. So one had actually certified you dead, and the other one had to come along and make sure that was right.
Yeah.
So of course I lost Poppy, didn't I? 101. In the care home, and I got the phone call to say it was actually the morning after we'd been in, and it was the manager to tell me she died. And she was the only one who's seen the body, because the GP then could be in his office in his surgery and do it without seeing the body. He certified her. And so you got from 2 to none, really. And I mean, fortunately, she died of old age, because if they put anything else, I would have gone bonkers. But at the end of the day, they got it right. But it was from a distance.
Yeah, of course.
So all that came in. They weren't doing any autopsies. So
no, I know. Horrendous. And then the DNRs that were thrown on as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were so many things that were wrong.
Totally wrong. Totally. Evil, actually, not just wrong.
Yeah.
Evil work. Really.
Yeah.
Can I just bring it back to the drug, the medicines itself? What could you explain how drug approval normally works under normal circumstances? How does that go about?
Well, you have to do clinical trials. You should do a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial, because that's the kind of gold star one to do.
Yeah.
And that's obviously what hasn't happened with the vaccines in the past, because they haven't actually been placebo-controlled trials, even going back to the first ones. But the latter ones are compared with the previous one that's supposed to be safe, because there are placebo-controlled trials, which there aren't, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to do your clinical trials. That takes, it generally takes 10 years and more. Yeah. And what you do is you take out a patent on your chemical entity you've got that you think is going to be your wonder drug. You do clinical trials come in different stages. So you do the kind of basic trial to start off with on a few people, just to see if it's going to work. Yeah. And if it's not showing any sign of being good at all, then you scrap it, because if you go on to the later clinical trials, you're going to be spending a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's basically an investment in clinical trials that you, through the process, work out whether it's going to be something you should continue with or not.
Right.
So when all that information is put together, you then apply for a license. All right. So that's after phase 3. So you do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 is actually when you're to market. That's
Okay.
marketing lot. So at phase 3, you gather all that information together and you send it off to the regulators to analyse, to see whether they will give you a license. Okay, because the regulators are supposed to be looking after pharmacovigilance, and all that is, it's very important, it's drug safety. Okay,
Right.
They're trying to look at, or they should be looking at, whether it's safe for you and I to have that particular preparation.
Right.
Now, years ago, when things were on paper, it used to be a truckload of paper that was taken to the regulator, because that's how much information they put together.
Right.
So when the Pfizer vaccines applied for license, and eventually we got the Pfizer data released from the FDA, that was originally 451,000 pages. Okay, so that's what had to be looked through. Now, when the 3,250 analysts that had come from all over the world, that the Daily Clout got together to analyse that 451,000 pages, they took 18 months and more to go through it all. They had to have a new computer system to go through it all.
Yeah.
What happened with the MHRA, for example, is they got Pfizer, Moderna and AstraZeneca around the same time. It was about the end of September 2020, and they took 2 or 3 months to go through it all. And I mean, you know, Debbie and I go to, because we're boring, we go to the board meetings of the MHRA. And yeah, you pick up snippets ever so often. So over the time, we realised that they were down on staff. So they only have 1,350 staff if they're at their full complement.
Mm-hmm.
They were down on staff. They kept saying that the people that they were finding as replacements weren't experienced. In that time frame, at the end of 2020, they were working from home.
Right.
Some of my freedom of information, I found out that they kept saying the computers were crashing. And they were the people that were analysing all this information, all this data.
Wow.
And we know from the Pfizer document analysis, Pfizer went in and subsumed, it's called, I didn't know that word. They told the regulators that it's okay here, nothing to see. You know, you don't need to go through it all, safe and effective.
Oh, God.
Yeah, because we know from the analysis that's been done properly on the documentation, it's not safe and effective.
No.
So I got involved with that, and I can tell you about that later. But, you know, there's a lot of information that has to be provided, and you are supposed to, as a drug manufacturer, you are supposed to send everything, good or bad.
Right.
Okay.
Mm.
You know that happens? Don't know. But the other thing that the regulator is supposed to do is go into the manufacturers and see the process, make sure that there's a great big orange guide that they have to follow. And especially with biotech, very difficult to produce living things in a preparation. Very difficult. So there's more stringent procedures that they have to go through. During lockdown, the MHRA started doing that virtually.
It's madness.
You hide what you want behind the corner, don't you?
It's just madness.
Yeah, and I don't think they've come back from that. So nothing was done properly. Because they were increasing the manufacture of these genetic therapies to send them around the world, there was billions being produced. They converted places that shouldn't have been converted. There was an old post office converted to manufacture some of the vaccines.
Wow.
I mean, it's not right. I mean, there was a panorama program right at the beginning.
I remember that.
The PCR test.
I remember watching that, yeah. So
they had these lightning labs. So they were doing everything very quickly. And it showed because there were lots of mistakes they're making. And they were filming inside the lab, and there were 2 experts pulling it all to pieces, and nothing happened about it.
Nothing. Nobody was bothered.
No. So all the procedures that you're supposed to follow aren't being followed. And if you listen to somebody like June Rain, and she will tell you that they've always done robust analysis. That was the word they used, robust. They wouldn't know what robust was if they fell over it. And we mustn't keep the patient waiting. So the whole thing was speeded up. So as soon as a manufacturer, a pharmaceutical company got the evidence, they were supposed to send it into the regulator. And they did this looking at everything at the same time.
God. And yet they were so delighted to try and get this into as many arms as possible around the world.
Well, that's the other thing as well, because it was the first time you got a multi-dose in one vial. You were, if you remember, there were temperatures talked about at the beginning.
That's right, yeah. Wasn't it one had to be kept cold? Was that the AstraZeneca one, I think, was it? Or Pfizer, and I think one wasn't.
Minus 90 or something. But they didn't actually, the NHS didn't have delivery vans to get this out to the people in the UK at those temperatures. So that was what was said. So it was frozen. You had to then get it to where you were going to administer it. You had to defrost it. And then you added in saline, and then it was very susceptible to vibration. And that's why they said you had to turn it 10 times. Now, you 10 times and me 10 times, and speed you do it and speed I do it, it's not necessarily going to be the same. There was no standard operating procedure. That's all they said. People apparently were looking up how to mix it on the internet.
Wow.
And, some people got injected with the whole vial. There were mistakes made.
Yeah.
If you think about it, as you're trying to take a fifth of that content into your syringe to put into a person, has that been mixed properly? What is actually in your syringe compared with the fifth one that they do? And then you're going to vibrate the molecules through the syringe needle. Again, it's been transported in a truck. It's been mixed in somewhere, and then on top of that, it's put into an arm. So it was very, very. I mean, some people would have just got saline. It won't have been mixed properly.
Yeah, and I think there were some mistakes made. I think that's probably why thankfully, so many people have been okay.
Yeah. But you mean somebody like Headley Reese will tell you all those stages of manufacturing, including defrosting it, adding in the saline, it's a different product you're talking about each time, and you've got to go in and test it again. Nothing like that done.
I presume that's why they were talking very much about batch numbers as well, and there were certain batch numbers that people reacted worse than others.
Well, there was a whole group of people who started saying that they were experimenting by releasing certain batches that they knew was worse than others.
Nothing would surprise me in this world, Cheryl.
So
I mean, it's just frightening. Regarding the MHRA, then, I know you've challenged the MHRA directly, including, I think didn't you speak at one of the board meetings as well?
yeah, they were stupid, really. They didn't do any due diligence, did they? So every board meeting, you can send in a question.
Yeah.
And I always do, or try to. And there's a box. Would you like to ask this live if asked? So I tick that every time. So I was asked, would I like to ask it? And I thought, oh, goodness me. And then they sent these forms out, this contract. And it was weird. If we want to dub your voice, can we? And if we want to change the image or something. And I actually spoke to a solicitor and I said, what do I do? Because I want to ask the question. He says, anything you don't agree with, put a line through and then sign it. So I did. But it was a strange form. And I got invited on. And of course, the questions are at the end. And the chair, as he was then, said I was to ask my question, which I did. And we have Alison Cave, who is the safety officer, the chief safety officer. At that point, she was the highest paid person at the MHRA. And she answered me. She read it off a laptop. So she'd had the question in advance and she'd written down her answer. And I was just asking about the different means of picking up on side effects. They had these 4 main processes and what have you. And I also asked about freedom of information because they'd stopped answering people. They'd put it on hold. And when that was going to come back on, it was going to come back on the next week, apparently. Yeah, surprisingly enough. Anyway, and so the chair, after she'd finished waffling on, and I was chomping at the bit because what she was saying was really annoying me. And the chair said, Mrs. Grainger, are you happy with that answer? I said, well, actually, no. Which obviously didn't expect me to say. And I just said, please, can you throw some light on the fact that at the moment, and I think I'm right in saying at that point, it was 1 in 426 doses that had been given led to a serious side effect. Oh, no, this isn't the right platform to answer this. And I was shut down. I went very quickly then.
Wow.
And you think, well, at least in the States, they get chances to, to speak to the Senate and Congress and whatever it is. They've got these platforms whereby you can go in and present a case.
Yeah.
There's nothing here. You can't go and ask the MHRA questions live like I did. And obviously, once I said something they didn't like, I got shut down. It wasn't the right platform. And you felt like saying, well, what is the right platform?
Well, exactly. Is there a platform?
Well, there isn't, is there?
No.
So the only way you can go is freedom of information.
Okay, so speaking of which, because I was leading me straight on to, because you submitted, I presume you submitted a few, but there was one, I think, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something to do with the AstraZeneca for primary data. What were you hoping to kind of obtain then? I
was listening to Aaron Siri in the States, the lawyer that heads up ICANN. So he had gone after the Pfizer and eventually the Moderna data. So this is the data that you put forward to regulators for license. Yeah. So all their data. And I listened to what he said, and he had this organisation that had actually asked in the first place, that were medics and scientists and what have you. And they were told that they could have it, but they'd have to get it over, tens of years. It was going to take a long time. So he'd actually been brought in to go to court to actually expedite the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll copy them. So I went to a conference and I spoke to HART, the group of medics and scientists here, and they said they would sign the whole thing. So that was me copying, and I'd asked for the AstraZeneca because that was the British information.
Yeah.
And I didn't get anywhere because obviously it was too much information for them to give to me. So I would have to ask for it in little bits. Well, I mean, which bit do you ask for? It's it's kind of impossible to do. So I kind of gave up on that. But I mean, in the States, they originally said 55 years they would take to release the information, and then they moved to 75 years as the court case went on. But yeah, so and the states, I mean, you've got 50 judiciaries to have a go at, so you can pick the one that you think's best. And the one that they used for Pfizer, when they went back for Moderna, the ruling in the States is you go back to the same judge because it's the same kind of case. So he's used to it, which again is in your favour if you've already won. So we don't have that here.
So it's a lot easier to hide in the shadows.
Well, every regulator gets the same data. So the Pfizer document analysis is exactly the same as what they saw at the MHRA. So it's just that they didn't look at it. So, but I went in because, so June Rain, who's now retired, but she was the CEO, she had done a meeting and she stood up in November 22 and talked about the ways that they assess and gather in side effects. And she said that they were very pleased because they got this yellow card vaccine monitor and it had 2,000, as she mentioned then, 2,000 pregnant women, and they would have a denominator. And I thought, well, that's great because we haven't got any pregnancy data.
Okay.
And, this is the end of 22. They started rolling it out to pregnant women in April 21. So it'd been going a long time. There'd been a lot of women who'd given birth at that point. So I decided I'd write to Dear June and ask her with the freedom of information. And I didn't do it right. I asked 9 questions. The 9th one was about the risk benefit. It's funny because we all say risk benefit analysis. The MHRA always talk about benefit risk.
Right.
Yeah, they put the benefits first and we can't get out of them what the benefits are. So, that's peculiar. But I just wanted to know, after this monitor, had the risk benefit in pregnancy changed?
Yeah.
So I asked them these 9 questions. And do you want me to go into a bit? Do you want to put that first slide up? And then I've got...
Let's bring the slide up. Yeah, let's do that. There we go.
Yeah, so all that is at the top is showing the 2 years it took to go through the whole process. So you've got to have a bit of staying power because it's a ridiculous process. So sent in the freedom of information. They came back to me and they refused to give me the pregnancy data because they said it's section 22. They were going to publish. So they don't say if it's next week, next year, or sometime never. They don't have to say that. They just say they're going to publish. Now, they gave me at that same time an interim report, which I didn't understand why they'd done that, but they did. So they'd in July 21. So the vaccine had been out for nearly 6 months.
Yeah.
They'd actually presented to what's called the Pharmacovigilance Expert Advisory Group. And what they're supposed to do is assess risk. Assess the risk of you and I taking a medication.
Yeah.
So they presented this interim report and it wasn't good news. Okay. And of course, it wasn't just pregnant women, it was the whole set of people. So there were 36,604 in the whole thing eventually. There was obviously less at that point. But I gave the information to Norman Fenton, who very kindly had a look at it and was incensed because they were saying things like 51% of the whole group had at least one adverse drug reaction, and 41% on average of the pregnant women had an adverse drug reaction. So these were people who were asked if they wanted to join the monitor, then told when they'd taken the vaccine and what they'd taken. So we had when and what, and then they were followed up at regular intervals. And what was supposed to happen with pregnant women is they were supposed to be followed up 10 weeks after they gave birth, because obviously it's 2 lives we're talking about.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So that's how the monitor worked, okay? It was more accurate than yellow card because it was actually a set of people we knew about. We weren't waiting for people to come in like the yellow card does and report something had gone wrong. We actually knew these people when they were vaccinated and followed them up.
And for those that are listening and don't know what the yellow card system is, it's it's a system. Correct me again if I'm wrong, Cheryl, but even doctors don't seem to know what the yellow card system is, and not many people knew what it was to report a vaccine injury.
No, a lot of people don't. I mean, it's called the yellow card because it used to be in the BNF, British National Infirmary, and MIMS and what have you. There used to be this yellow piece of paper that you could send in, written report. It takes a bit of time to fill it in, and that's why a lot of people don't. So I've got the list at the bottom there. I mean, June Rain in this lecture she gave was talking about these 4 things. So these are the 4 means by which they were supposed to pick up side effects.
Right.
So these people come in, whether they're medics or Joe Public, reporting what's gone wrong and filling in a form. Then we've got the yellow card vaccine monitor that I've just explained, which is real-time data. There's no need for it to be peer-reviewed and published because it's more accurate than the yellow card reports that they were publishing anyway. And then you've got this rapid cycle and ecological analysis. Name puts you off. That's looking at GP records from 20% GP practices, and there's about 13 million reports they look at of records. But they're looking for things that they're expecting.
Right.
This is the expected level of whatever, and this is what we're seeing. So it's observed versus expected. They're not looking out for things that are new.
Yeah, it's really difficult, this, isn't it? Because there's so many, over the past few years, we're hearing so many issues, be it sudden deaths or collapses or turbo cancers, but how are they ever going to correlate the causation of that and attribute it to the, it's been quite clever, really. I think the evil, it seems like an evil plan to me, where they're able to cover this situation up very easily, and people will go, well, it's cancer, so it could have happened at any time. Heart problems could have happened at any time, and it's not the vaccine.
Yeah, well, you've got to look at patterns, haven't you? And to be perfectly honest, in January 22, Jessica Rose, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Jessica Rose, she actually took the Bradford Hill criteria, which is how you do causation. So there are 9 criteria in this Bradford Hill set of criteria that if you can fill 5 of them out the 9, it shows causation. She filled all 9. Okay, so that was using VAERS data and what have you. She filled all 9 of them. And she's Canadian. I bumped into her at a conference and I said, why aren't we shouting this from the rooftops? Because to me, that's the thing, causation. And, she was trying her best, but nobody wanted to know. Peter McCulloch did the same thing.
Right.
And, you can prove causation. But if you look at the beginning of you filling in a yellow card report or doing this monitor, it says 4 things. It says the existence of an adverse reaction report does not necessarily mean that the vaccine has caused the reaction. Secondly, sometimes reactions can be part of the condition being treated rather than being caused by the vaccine. The third one, many factors have to be considered when assessing whether a vaccine has caused a reported adverse reaction. And then fourthly, it says, it is important to note that most people receive vaccinations without having any serious side effect. You read all that and you think, well, there's no point me bothering with this. I've only got a bit of a runny nose. I don't want to put it down. It's trying to get you not to fill in the form.
Yeah.
So that's what's there. So I think that, that needs taking out. It should be an unbiased report. So we got this interim report. Norman Fenton did a Substack on it, and that was sent everywhere.
Right.
And we tried to pull it all to pieces. He thought it was scandalous that they weren't actually releasing this data. And there's no need for it to be peer-reviewed, which obviously a lot of people have question marks over anyway. So I didn't get anywhere with that. I asked for an internal review, which is the MHRA looking at themselves to see if they've acted properly. And of course, they said, yes, they had. And then you go on to the Information Commissioner's Office to complain about that.
Right.
And they came back and upheld the decision of the MHRA. And it's at that point it was suggested to me I go to appeal. And because I didn't know what I was doing, I did. So you go through this process of applying to the General Regulatory Council, and then they got hold of the MHRA and asked them if they wanted to be the second respondent, because the first respondent is the ICO, and they jumped at the chance.
Yeah.
Then by September, we were supposed to have the hearing, the appeal hearing, and they weren't ready. Little old me was ready, but not. So we had a directions hearing in front of the judge, and we were getting nowhere fast with this. At that hearing, the MHRA's barrister told me that June Rain might be called as a witness. I thought, oh, that'd be good. Anyway, she didn't. So this was going on, and eventually the hearing was postponed till December 24. We now are. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
And just before that, to shut me up, they produced a report as a preprint on the monitor. And they said from that, they'd answered all my questions. And I got asked 4 times by their barrister to drop my appeal.
All right.
And me being awkward wouldn't, because when I looked at me, remember I said 9 questions at the beginning?
Yeah.
There was no way they could answer, as they have done, those questions by the information they've got out the monitor. They can't say what they've said so the answers were wrong.
Interesting.
So I decided to keep going. So we were arguing because of this preprint in December. So the hearing was, we were actually given instructions to do it in a different way. They came up with what was the Scott schedule. I didn't know what any of these things were, but that meant that, they say something. So I asked my questions.
Yeah.
Next column, they answer my questions. I then in the third column say why they can't say that as my answers to my questions. And then they come back again. So it's what's used in a builder's dispute.
Right. Okay.
That sort of thing. So we had to put that together. And I got Norman Fenton and all his colleagues who were interested. So researchers, medics, statisticians, people who could look at data. They analysed the whole thing for me and fed back information about my answers I'd been given. And in my column, when I printed it out, I got 32 pages of it. Wow. So they were a bit fed up with me by the time we got to the final hearing. And I had 3 people who were my witnesses.
Yeah.
I got Norman Fenton, I got a gynecologist, and I got a guy who was involved in the Pfizer document analysis. And I didn't know until that day, and he'd already written 2 statements. I didn't know that he wasn't allowed to be a witness because he was in California.
Oh, well, that's not helpful, is it?
Not when you've got up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do it, it's not good at all. Anyway, so, you find out as you go along. So I had the final hearing, and then 6 weeks or so later, I got the judgment, and I basically was dismissed. Isn't that nice? Isn't that a lovely word?
Lovely indeed.
Lovely word. And it's a bit like Claire Craig when she went in the HSA to ask for excessive death data. Yeah. And she was dismissed as well. Okay. But at least I did one better, because I actually got them to print the information. So we could see how bad their interpretation of their own information was. So in this judgment, they said the MHRA and indeed the Commissioner had accepted that the public interest was weighted in favour of the release of the information. You think, oh, that's good. And then further on, it said that the publication of the raw data would only release part of the information available and could easily, as happened before, be misused, misquoted and misunderstood. So we're no good at analysing our data. It's just the MHRA who can do it. And then the final thing they say is misinformed hysteria about the vaccine may equally put lives at risk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
That was my judgment.
Wow.
So we got the preprint, and then we got the print, and we can completely pull that to pieces, basically. So if you go on to the next slide, and I put these slides together because it's figures, isn't it? Sometimes it helps. So there's the reference to the information, their report, and those are the 6 authors. So Alison Cave, who was already mentioned,
Yeah.
the Chief Safety Officer, she was one of them. And Traguno is the Deputy Director of Patient Safety Monitoring. Okay.
Right.
And
yeah.
he was the witness that the MHRA barristers used against me. So, yeah. So, there were 36,604 people who registered to join in with this monitor. And we said that 52.1% had at least one adverse drug reaction. So that's over half of them. And they just said that these were expected acute reactions, which is what they say all the time. Oh, that was expected. That wasn't serious. That was acute. And then in the preprint, they actually put in the word only. That got dropped when they went to the print. So obviously they've been told to drop it. But they said only 13.7%, which is 4,134 people, or 1 in 7, had a medically serious event.
Only
is what they...
I mean, I mean, that in itself's disgusting. You know, what happened to morality when someone is harmed?
Yeah.
One person who's harmed should have stopped all of this.
I know. Well, of course, in the Pfizer document analysis, when they got the post-marketing for the first 90 days, 1,223 people had died.
Bloody hell.
All vaccines have been stopped after, 25 to 50 people dying in the past. So if you look at serious, they use this MHRA scale for serious in terms of classifying what's serious and what isn't. So serious, it's death, something that's life-threatening, something that involves hospitalisation, something that is disability, which can be permanent damage, and congenital or birth defect comes into that as well. So 1 in 7 had one of those 5.
1 in 7, that's massive.
So that's like going into a garage and buying a new car, and the guy saying, oh, 1 in 7 people who buy these cars either die or are hospitalised or are very ill.
It's terrifying, Cheryl. It's terrifying that they can actually class this as only. What's wrong with these?
That word only got removed when they went to the full published thing rather than the preprint. So they got told to remove that, but there was very little else that got changed.
But this should have been stopped, shouldn't it, Cheryl? They should never. I mean, they're still pushing the bloody thing.
They're not telling anybody about this monitor. They're not telling anybody about that result. I've forced them to publish it, and they've kept completely quiet about it. And I've kept going back to them to ask them about it, and they're not saying anything. They also say there are no safety concerns in the pregnant and breastfeeding patients. Well, 41% of the pregnant women had at least one adverse drug reaction. So what we're saying is the data doesn't substantiate the statements that they're making. So we have the summary of product characteristics all about the drugs. It's not borne out anything in the monitoring that. We have the patient information leaflets, and we have these what they call public assessment reports that are written on a regular basis about anything that's come up. Nothing is mentioned. So we're saying that the data in this monitor highlights the gaps in the statements. It's showing no evidence of safety. You can't say it's safe at all. And there's evidence of harm, especially in the pregnant. So all these people that I had helping me analyse this information, who obviously know a lot more than me about how the data should be and how it should be analysed, came up with things that I kept getting emails off them: misleading, meaningless, underestimated, obfuscated, serious omissions, the interpretation is inadequate, etc., etc. So those are the sort of things they kept coming back with. And no wonder the MHRA aren't talking about it, because they should be ashamed of it. The analysis is terrible. And obviously, at the end of the day, it doesn't answer the question that I asked. And so I've said it's duplicitous, it's disingenuous, and it's malfeasance. They're not doing their job. They're not doing pharmacovigilance. They're not letting people know about the safety of these vaccines.
What's wrong with the people that are involved in all this? What I mean, are they? I don't understand that they. And I have this a lot on my podcast where I question people. How do they sleep at night? I question it, and there's it goes on throughout society.
Yeah.
And I can't get my head around how they see this as a good thing.
Well, exactly. It's done so much damage. I mean, they've got their own evidence to say 1 in 7. And we're not saying 1 in 7 had a side effect. We're saying 1 in 7 had a medically serious event.
Oh, it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
So obviously, I got to see the whole of their report. It wasn't just the pregnant that I went after. So if you go to the next slide, I can tell you what's wrong with the pregnant data that they came up with. So the pregnant women, if you look at them, they average 73 days in this monitor. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 5 to 244 days. So nobody had a full pregnancy. Okay.
Wow.
So, it's 73 days is 10 weeks, and the majority, the average time of leaving was 10 weeks. What made them leave? Why were they leaving? If you just lost your baby, you're not going to be filling in your monitor. What was actually stopping them continuing in the monitor? The other thing that's wrong is the trimester. So it's divided into 3 periods, the pregnancy.
Yeah. The
trimester of pregnancy was unknown in 30% of the women. Well, that's hard to believe because most women know their due date. And if you know your due date, you can work out which trimester you're in.
Yeah.
And that is important because of thalidomide.
Right.
So thalidomide was given for morning sickness. That tends to happen in the first 3 months, the first trimester.
Right.
And therefore they took the treatment. And what they found was that on days 34 to 50, if they were taking it then after the last period, that's when the organ development was affected. So with thalidomide, they could pin it down to days in the cycle.
Okay.
So it's very important that we know where they are on that cycle. So with congenital anomaly, there were only 8 listed, but there was no detail about them. You've got something wrong with the fetus and it's not detailed. Preterm births, there were 4 mentioned, and this is the only time that we get this free text data. So in these monitors, you get asked if you've got 1 of 10 or 12 things, just a sore arm and different basic things. And then you're given the chance of waffling on what's wrong with you. You can write it up. So that's your free text data. And the only time they mentioned that were preterm births. But they only said there were 4 of them. It didn't say anything about it.
Right.
And breastfeeding, we got 53.5% of the breastfeeding mums reported 900 adverse drug reactions. And there were 1,421 women missing from the data. And what they actually assume, if they don't get a response from a person in the monitor, then there'll be no adverse drug reactions at all. Yeah,
they just cut it off. It's not happened.
It's not happened. I mean, we don't know why those pregnant women left after 10 weeks. And 50% of participants had been lost to follow up. So you remember I said they were going to chase them 10 weeks after the birth to see if everything was okay.
Yeah.
So 50% that didn't happen. And that is a critical failure of the monitor anyway. It's not been done properly. So we know that women represents about 76% of the serious and non-serious adverse drug reactions. So most of the drug reactions are in women. 98% of the reproductive disorders are in women, and women aged 20 to 49 are overrepresented in the serious and non-serious adverse drug reactions. So there's a bias towards females, which is what Naomi Wolf has been going on about, and everybody's been criticising her.
Yeah.
The other thing that they looked at in the monitor, they looked at tinnitus when they were doing this report, and also, sorry, I seem to have a bit of a tickle.
That's okay.
Tinnitus and menstrual problems.
Right.
So if you remember, Naomi Wolf reported quite a lot about all the menstrual problems that were being reported into her.
Yeah.
And the conclusion that the MHRA made in the report on the monitor was that the menstrual problems that were recorded were driven by the media.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they didn't think there was a problem. And we know that pregnancy adverse drug reactions, they're listed on 73 pages at the back of the monitor report with no discussion. And the total of ADRs are listed on 221 pages with no discussion. So there's a lot of adverse drug reactions listed. It actually blows your mind a bit.
It's madness.
It's absolute madness. It's absolute madness. So that's why they wouldn't, I assume, release this information. So we basically got it 4 years after the rollout had happened. And they're still not saying anything to everybody, including the pregnant. But you can't say it's safe and effective. I mean, you've not been able to say that for a long time.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
No, I said you shouldn't be able. Sorry, I mean, because of this, you shouldn't be able to say.
No, of course they shouldn't. But they're still saying it. They're still saying it.
They're still saying it.
Because they are still pushing it with pregnant women, aren't they? That's the thing.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And one time you were told not to have paracetamol, not to eat certain foods, not to
have soft cheeses, but you can have a genetic novel therapy.
It's absolute insanity.
Yes, it is. And it goes through the placenta, which is why there are problems. Exactly. So what we can compare this with is, if you go to the next one, this is the final slide. I don't want to bore people with slides. In America, they had a V-safe monitor. So same thing, they had people before they took the vaccine, when they had the vaccine was listed, what they had, and then followed them up. And of course, the Americans would do it better, wouldn't they? We had 36,000, they had 10 million. So it wasn't being released. So this was the CDC. It wasn't being released, just like the MHRA wasn't releasing their monitor. So ICANN, who got the Pfizer documents, they went after them and they took them to court. And the court ordered release of the data in September 22. And they ended up with 151 million health surveys, which they then had to analyse themselves. I mean, we've gone one better in a way, a lot smaller, but we've got their report and we know how bad that they have analysed the data. We know they've shown themselves up. So I can analyse this, and it came out that 25% were incapacitated the day after vaccination. That's a quarter of them.
Yeah.
7.7% had a serious health event, and that was about 2 to 3 events each. So it wasn't just one thing, and we know that you've known people who've had several things that have gone wrong. And 70% needed medical attention or ER, the emergency room intervention, and or hospitalisation. So it created a lot of extra work for the health services. 97%, there were 35,691 pregnant vaccinated people in this monitor in the States, but no outcomes were recorded for 97% of them.
Wow.
So they did the same thing. They didn't follow people up.
Wow.
So they must have seen things and didn't want to follow them up. And don't forget, in the States, you've got 10 million people who've taken part in this and knew nothing about what the results were showing. I mean, it's bad enough we had 36,000 in the UK who never found out what has happened, what they contributed to. They also saw disturbing trends in miscarriages and menstrual disturbances in this monitor. Now, do you remember before I talked about the free text data where you could waffle on about what was really wrong with you rather than just sticking to their list that they were asking you about?
Yeah.
These are just two examples of, in the States, the sort of thing that the free text data was showing.
Right. Now,
so you're supposed to have people at the regulators, MHRA, FDA, etc., looking through these things. I think it's heart-rending, this. So the first one there is when somebody had vertigo. So they took the vaccine and then not longer afterwards got extreme vertigo, that they let them know in this monitor. They let them know. And then a few days later, they're saying it was serious vertigo. And then a few days after that, they were saying, I have extreme vertigo. I need help. My doctor does not know how to help me. Please help. Somebody calling out for help. And then again, I have extreme vertigo from Pfizer. My doctor can't help. I asked you for help and you did not respond. Pfizer did not reply to my email. I need help. Help, please. And then finally, I have vertigo since March 18th after second Pfizer dose. I have asked for help here and no one responds. My doctor has no advice. Pfizer does not respond. Help, please. How can you sit at a desk reading these things that are coming through? And then there's one of, very sadly, a death. So this was 25th of March. Shortness of breath, swelling of throat, death. So this is the relative, obviously, filling this in.
Yeah.
Then the day after died. Same day, reaction after shot, died. Day after, anaphylaxis. Then reports death. And then a few days later, death with exclamation marks. Do you guys even check the responses?
Wow.
And then dead, death, death on more reports. And then this is ridiculous. Nobody's reading this. She had a reaction within 20 minutes of vaccine and died. Have been reporting her death to you all since beginning of checking death. And those are the sorts of things. I mean, they all won't be as bad as that. But those are people who think they're in a monitor situation that can pick up on the fact that they've got problems. And nobody's responding to it.
And like you said earlier on, we were subjected with this ticker tape of death every day on the news, where so many people with COVID have died. We knew it was all, they've had a test within 60 days or whatever. But yet nobody's ever talked about how many people have been harmed or have died of this injection. Nobody's ever discussed it.
Well, people have discussed it, but not the people who should be discussing it.
Yeah, the mainstream media are not going to come out and have this. Today, so many people have been injured by this drug or that drug.
Yeah.
But this particular drug, which they rolled out, which they pretty much forced people to have, brainwashed, psychologically damaged people, coerced, pretty much told people they needed to have it, or you weren't going back to normal.
No.
You want to go back to normal?
Yeah.
You take this drug.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible that there's such a body of information out now. There are so many studies and reports on what has happened. It's mounting. It really is, especially on things like the turbo cancers.
Yeah.
I mean, turbo cancer, you're basically talking about something that happens in a younger person than it's ever happened in before, happens in organs that they don't see this in normally, happens in a body with 2 or 3 different cancers going on, which again is unusual. And they come in at stage 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And that is not the norm. I mean, you can argue about what cancer is and what have you, but at the end of the day, it's not normal. You're seeing patterns that have changed. Excess deaths are still not back to normal. They're actually still high.
But they're able to play with statistics, Cheryl, as well, aren't they?
Well, yes, they rewrote the formula for working out excess deaths a few years back.
I believe so.
So, I mean, I had the formulas written out. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They changed it. And you can't do that in the middle of making comparisons with the past. So it's quite something's going to give. I mean, things like PIP, so the personal payments for disability.
Mm-hmm.
That Ed Dowd warned about that when we interviewed him some time ago, because it was happening in the States as well. So disabilities was a black swan event in the UK and the US. It was going up so quickly. And his comment when we interviewed him about what was happening in the UK was, you're not going to be able to afford to pay these payments soon, because you're going to have too many people who are asking for the payment. And of course, it's all down to people who go to work and what have you. That's when I shout at the telly, because there's a lot of people who can't go to work because of what's happened to them.
Yeah, that's right.
So these, it's feeding into all what we're seeing. We're seeing patterns. We're seeing black swan events, which means that there's no chance of it happening normally.
Do you feel this is a failure of individuals, or is it a systemic failure of the system itself, or darker still?
I think it's darker still. I mean, it's a failure of a few people who, don't forget, we've got this revolving door. So they're here 1 minute, so Ian Hudson, who was at the MHRA before June Rain, he went on to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and he's now being looked at for paedophilia.
Well, and Bill Gates is all mixed up in the Epstein thing anyway. So
it's all it's all interlinked, isn't it?
Yeah.
So very few people, really, compared with how many billions that we are, and they're controlling it because it's been planned over so long.
Oh, without doubt. I don't doubt that for a second. I mean, I can't prove it, but that's exactly how I feel. This was a big planned event for the technocratic takeover, the fourth industrial revolution that's happening.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, you've got mRNA. So you have messenger RNA in your body. So it copies a bit of DNA, it goes off and makes a protein in a cell, and then poof, it's got rid of. There's an enzyme to get rid of it, it goes. So it's probably around for about 5 minutes. So that's natural mRNA. We've called this mRNA because it's modified RNA. And it's got pseudouridine in it. We had 2 people win a Nobel Prize for inventing it. It's something that the body doesn't recognize. It can't get rid of it. And that's why it stays, keep making this toxin. So we've got, normally, we get our cells to make human proteins.
Yeah.
It needs human proteins to make the cell up and all its contents and what it has to do.
Yeah.
Now we've got something going into the cell to make toxins. And what we've done is we've wrapped it in lipid nanoparticles, which are not supposed to be used in humans. So you can see a box of lipid nanoparticles that states that on the box. And they're oncogenic and they're highly inflammatory, and there's lots of things, toxic. There's lots of words that are nasty words about lipid nanoparticles. They should not be in the human body. The more mRNA you put together, the more lipid nanoparticles around there, and they're both going to cause problems in the body. But the fatty coat allows that mRNA to get into the cell. It can get through the cell membrane, and that's why it goes everywhere. So, I mean, this is all very simple terms, but Moderna has got 3.3 times the amount of RNA compared with Pfizer.
Well, yeah, well, Moderna, the name Moderna is kind of created as mRNA, isn't it? And
it's the only product they've got. They've never had a product on the market before.
No, and it's technology, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not your old-fashioned medicine. It's a technology.
Yeah, and you've got with Pfizer, you've got 30 milligrams or micrograms, and with Moderna, you've got 100 micrograms of mRNA, and Moderna has 25 micrograms in the kiddie dose. That's virtually the same as the adult dose of Pfizer.
Tell you what, Cheryl, I've made some mistakes in my life, but one of the best decisions I've ever made was staying away from that stuff.
Yeah.
It's horrific what they've done to people.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrific.
I mean, I've been lucky because I haven't needed to take preparations. I've never had a flu vaccine because I couldn't see any point in it. In my head, I'm not scared of infection. If I keep myself healthy, I won't get it.
Yeah, we have an immune system, don't we? And the problem being now is that the immune systems are being destroyed, aren't they, by these medications?
Yeah. But when I was a kid, I got measles and mumps and rubella, and I had them all. My sister went to school apparently and brought them all home, and I got them a lot worse than she did. So I've got a good immunity system that has protected me.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel I need these things.
We're in a world though where people want quick fixes all the time, aren't we? And it's been pushed on you. The marketing is quite outstanding. It's in your face. Social media is a big problem for that. So then you got the fat jab thing going on at the moment as well. So there's a constant marketing.
Well, it's a quick fix, isn't it? I mean, you go to the GP and your termination of your interview with him is him writing a script. That's how it works. Yeah. But with the fat jabs, people don't realise about the side effects. So in America at the moment, there's an 1,800 strong class action. And one of the main things they're complaining of is permanent blindness.
Wow.
So it can cause cancer and all sorts of terrible things. But, just taking something to lose a bit of weight and you lose your sight.
But as the situation can potentially get darker, and this is just hypothetical, but you can see where the world is. Once they have everything in the digital ID infrastructure and everything else, and the NHS app, and Debbie talks about this a lot as well, that they could be, you have to keep up your vaccinations, otherwise you don't get access to services.
I mean, there's 34 million who've got the NHS app, and that makes it easier to get the prescription, to get this and to get that appointment and what have you. And so you get kind of pulled into these things. But I kind of do some things with the Together group, and we're going around different towns and giving out leaflets about and talking to people about say no to digital ID. And it varies from town to town, but a lot of people, it's probably 80 to 90% of people are dead against it.
Oh, they are totally against it. I think the problem, I mean, it's a different topic, but it feeds into it. But I don't think people realise what digital ID firmly is as well. The full size of it.
I've nothing to hide. The people who are for it turn to us and say, I've nothing to hide.
Yeah, of course they do.
And, we saw a lot of people, the last place we did, who were pushing prams with babies. And we got on one side of the leaflet, it was about having a barcode on your kid, which is what you're going to get at birth.
Yeah, they've talked about it already, haven't they?
Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that you need to scare people in a way to wake them up. But, I do believe you've got to keep talking to people and spreading the word.
Absolutely, and the work you've been doing is so important, Cheryl. And I thank you for that, because we need more Cheryls that are going to be involved in putting pressure, because obviously there's not enough, because otherwise you'd get some results because you're not getting anything back, are you?
No, well, I just need to spread the word, this 1 in 7, because it blows my head.
It's massive. And another thing that, and I hope I'm wrong, and I wanted to be wrong all the way through this, I really have. But it's been in my head for ages, that we're not likely to see the worst of this yet until there's those that are trying to have babies.
Well, we've already got infertility down. We've already got, nations that are not capable of replacing themselves anymore. I mean, Japan's a goner. If you look at the statistics on how many are giving birth, the birth rate is so low. It's quite frightening.
Yeah, and that links to a document I found, and we put it on the Camp 3 News last week, actually, very briefly, and it's a United Nations document about replacement in terms of migration. where they said they actually were a hypothesis of populations going down and how we would ensure that populations go back up again would be migration.
Well, how many of the migrants coming in have actually been vaccinated?
Well,
a lot have come from African countries where there wasn't as much.
Well, exactly. We don't know anything, do we?
No, so we're the ones who are damaged. They're not.
It's so frightening.
Yeah. So yes, it's.
I know this is like very sobering conversations, but the conversations that are very important.
Yeah, well, as I say, I can't believe that the MHRA are still spouting forth that it's safe and effective, because they've got all the evidence to show that it's not.
They want stringing up.
And the CHM have got all these expert committees, and they're not doing anything. And they've got so many conflicts of interest. I mean, the CHM, when they released the minutes by mistake of their meetings, it was pages at the front of the minutes of conflicts of interest listed for all these profs and what have you that was on this, that, and the other committee. It's just frightening, because they're not going to do anything about it, because they've got money and they've got skin in the game, is the word. You know, they're making money.
And that's what it comes down to, you know, on a 3D human level, is the greed and the corruption. It's just greed. It's just pure greed. Yeah.
And one of the things we said about this published report, the Monitor report, was that the MHRA is 86% funded by pharma. So actually, all of them should have declared their conflicts of interest, because without pharma, they won't get paid.
Well, weren't the Bill and Melinda Gates funding the MHRA?
Pardon? Sorry.
Wasn't the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding?
They put little bits in everywhere, don't they? Too?
They do, yeah. Of course they do. They had money in the Guardian and the BBC and everywhere else as well.
Yeah. So he spread his money around. He has, just so he could make a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, and get away with what he's getting away with.
Yeah. So no, vaccines are not a good thing. I'm keeping my eye on what's happening with vaccines, because just generally the childhood vaccines are not safety tested, and they're only followed up for a few days. So they have not got proper evidence behind them. And like the flu vaccine, it's in negative equity. So that means that, no, not equity, efficacy, negative efficacy. So that means that there's a 27% increased chance, if you've had the vaccine, of getting the flu than if you've not had it. So you make yourself worse by taking the inoculation. You know,
it's madness.
It's mad. I mean, I was part of Rotary several years ago when all this nonsense started, and then they were doing an international push out of polio vaccines. And then I realised that they are about the 9th or 10th biggest contributor to the WHO. Didn't know that at the time I joined them. And, you know, they think they've cured polio, they do.
I know, I've seen all that kind of talk.
It's just ridiculous. And, you know, polio, vaccine-induced polio is just not in their radar at all. You know.
How are you finding work now then, Cheryl? How are you managing to cope with knowing what you know? I find, even in when you just wake up to the world, I find working in the general situation hard. So yours must be really challenging.
Well, I mean, I suppose they haven't caught up with me yet, but I'm teaching them what I'm supposed to teach them.
Right. So yeah.
I'm teaching them the code of practice, and when we get to the bit about safe, I quite often say, "What's the word you can't say about an ethical product?" And somebody will get it right, and you'll say, "I heard a lot about that word recently, haven't we?" And it goes, "Ooh." And yet there's some that are a little bit more know what you're talking about. because we go through the NHS as well, and all the reincarnations that's been through, because obviously whenever there's a new government, it gets changed. Nothing happens, but it gets changed, what I'm supposed to say to everybody. And it's been through different incarnations and none of them have worked. And the amount of money that's wasted is quite incredible. So it's, I mean, I don't do as much as I used to, and I don't chase it. It comes to me, and I'll help whoever I can through the exam, because that's nothing against what I believe, really.
No, of course not.
Not in the main. So, so I've just kept going.
Well, we need to get this information out there as best as possible, and I hope that people who watch this follow you, Cheryl, share this information, get this out there so more people are aware, especially those that are planning to have families.
Yeah.
This is really crucially important right now, that the young couples that are looking to have family are aware of what you're talking about here, because unfortunately we're in a world where we can't really have too much trust and faith in our doctors.
No, well, that's the problem, because I've been approached by lots of people over the years about, I've been put on this and why am I being put on that, and I've got this condition and what have you, and I do my best to try and help them, answer them and what have you, until we got to COVID and the treatment, and nobody asked me, apart from one lady who has major problems with the cardiovascular system and diabetes and what have you. And she'd spoken to her GP for a long time, and she spoke to me, and the GP won and said, the best one for you is AstraZeneca. And I thought, God, that's the worst one that you should take. So, I don't understand why it completely changed, but it did.
I want to thank you, Cheryl, for bringing this up. I hope you get this out more and more. I really do. I think it's crucial. I know you got a Substack that's somewhere where people can follow you, isn't it? Is there anywhere else? I'll make sure everything goes in the show notes.
Well, there's Twitter and what have you, and I just try and do as many interviews as I can, but it's difficult. We just need to let people know the 1 in 7. That's all you have to say. I mean, your reaction was classic, wasn't it? I mean, it is horrifying.
It is horrifying. It's evil, because I can't prove anything, but I feel all of this was a plan.
The thing that's evil, Anne, is because they have created all this death and disability and injury, and the things that might be available to those who are disabled and injured have been stopped.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's evil as well. Yeah. And I mean, things like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin are very well tolerated. They're not going to, why not give it a go just in case it works? And ivermectin is one of the WHO's essential medicines. It stops river blindness. It's an anti-parasitical drug. And a virus is a parasite. So, I don't understand why people won't look around to try and find something else that can help them.
It's as mentioned, a very, very clever marketing plan. There's so much money involved in this. There's no profit in cure.
No. And we've got lots of things that we're being treated for that we shouldn't be, which is what I was supposed to put in a new Substack soon, because just to remind people that the things to stay away from.
Well, I'll make sure all of your links are in the show notes, Cheryl. I appreciate your time. I'm sure there'll be an update at some point, so we'll have to do this again. You'll have to come on Camp 3 News with me and Debbie as well, and update us on more as we go along. can't avoid this stuff. You know, people like to put their head in the sand and forget that 2020 even happened, but I don't think we should ever forget, and we need to keep talking about it. So I appreciate your work, Cheryl. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you for your time, Ant. It's been great talking to you.
And you. Much love to you, Cheryl.
Take care.